First Contact and Ultimatum. The day the sky turned black was the day humanity realized it was no longer alone in the universe. It began like any other Tuesday morning, with people around the globe going about their daily routines. But as the hours passed, an eerie silence fell over the world's major cities. Traffic came to a standstill, phones stopped ringing, and millions of faces turned skyward in a mixture of awe and terror. Massive ships, each the size of a small country, had appeared in low Earth orbit. Their sleek obsidian hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating the illusion of gaping holes in the fabric of reality. Military radar stations worldwide went haywire, their systems overwhelmed by the sheer size and number of the alien vessels. In the heart of the Pentagon, Commander Elena Reyes stood before a wall of screens, her dark eyes narrowed as she processed the flood of incoming data. At 38, she was young for her position, but her brilliance in tactical analysis and crisis management had propelled her through the ranks. Now, as she watched the alien armada settle into orbit, she knew that every decision she made from this moment on would shape the fate of humanity. "Ma'am," a young lieutenant called out, his voice trembling slightly. "We're receiving a transmission from the lead ship. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, in every language." Reyes nodded, her jaw set. "Put it through." The screens flickered, and a face appeared that would haunt humanity's nightmares for years to come. The alien was vaguely humanoid, with iridescent scales covering its elongated skull and 4 piercing eyes that glowed with an unnatural intelligence. When it spoke, its voice was a discordant blend of mechanical precision and organic fluidity. "People of Earth," the alien began, its tone devoid of emotion, "we are the Zarkanian Dominion. Your planet now falls within our sphere of influence. You have 2 standard rotations of your world to surrender unconditionally and accept your place as a protectorate of our empire. Failure to comply will result in your complete annihilation." The message repeated once before the screens went dark, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Rice felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her, waiting for guidance, for hope, for any sign that this wasn't the end of everything they knew. "Get me the president," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her gut. "And connect me with every major military leader on the planet. We have work to do." The next 48 hours were a blur of emergency meetings, heated debates, and frantic preparations. World leaders, usually at odds with one another, found themselves united by a common existential threat. In secure bunkers and hidden command centers, strategies were proposed and discarded at a dizzying pace. Some argued for immediate surrender, hoping to buy time and preserve what they could of human civilization. Others called for a preemptive strike, to show the aliens that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. But as the deadline approached, it was Commander Reyes who proposed the third option. "We don't have the firepower to take them head-on," she explained to the assembled leaders, her holographic image flickering in war rooms across the globe. "And surrender is tantamount to suicide. The Zarkanians have no reason to keep us alive once we've submitted, but we have something they don't expect: diversity." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Throughout our history, humans have faced overwhelming odds and survived. We've adapted to every environment on this planet, overcome countless challenges. Our strength lies not in our technology or our numbers, but in our creativity, our unpredictability, our sheer stubborn will to survive." Reyes' plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Instead of a unified response, she proposed a decentralized, asymmetric approach. Each nation, each community would respond to the Zarkanian threat in its own unique way. Some would appear to surrender, only to engage in sabotage and espionage. Others would evacuate their cities, forcing the aliens to waste resources searching empty buildings. And a select few would stand and fight, drawing the invaders' attention while others prepared more elaborate countermeasures. "They expect us to behave like a hive mind," Rice concluded. "Let's show them just how wrong they are." As the deadline approached, Humanity held its collective breath. In New York, Tokyo, and Lagos, streets emptied as people huddled in shelters or fled to the countryside. In Moscow, Beijing, and New Delhi, military parades were hastily organized, a show of defiance masking furious activity behind the scenes. And in 1,000 labs and workshops around the world, scientists and engineers worked feverishly to adapt Earth's technology for the coming war. When the Zarkanian ultimatum expired, the response they received was not what they expected. Instead of a unified message of surrender or defiance, they were met with a cacophony of voices, each speaking in a different tone, a different language, offering a different response. From the United Nations, a message of peace and a request for dialogue. From Russia, a fiery declaration of war. From India, a philosophical treatise on the nature of cosmic harmony. From Brazil, an invitation to a global soccer tournament. And from 1,000 other sources, 1,000 other messages, each unique, each contradictory, each utterly, quintessentially human. In the Zarkanian command ship, the alien leaders were bewildered. Their intelligence had suggested a fractious species, yes, but nothing like this chaotic, inconsistent response. As they debated their next move, the humans were already setting their plans in motion. Commander Rice watched from her command center as the first Zarkanian ships began their descent towards Earth. She felt a mix of fear and fierce pride as she saw the first signs that her strategy was working. The alien fleet, designed for coordinated, overwhelming assaults, was splitting up, each ship heading towards a different part of the globe to deal with the myriad responses they'd received. "They took the bait," she murmured, allowing herself a small smile. Now the real work begins. As the Zarkanian ships entered Earth's atmosphere, they were met not with a unified defense, but with 1,000 small resistances. In some places, they found empty cities, their sensors confused by cleverly disguised decoys. In others, they were welcomed with open arms, only to find their systems compromised by hidden viruses. And in a few key locations, they faced fierce, if seemingly futile, military resistance. The aliens, accustomed to swift victories over homogeneous opponents, found themselves bogged down in a conflict unlike any they had faced before. Each human nation, each community, presented a different challenge, a different puzzle to solve. And with every passing hour, humanity learned, adapted, and prepared for the next phase of the war. In her command center, Commander Rice allowed herself no rest. She coordinated with leaders around the world, adjusting strategies on the fly, always staying one step ahead of the invaders. As reports flooded in of small victories and costly defeats, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. This was humanity's darkest hour, but also its finest. As the first day of the invasion drew to a close, Rice addressed her staff, her voice tired but resolute. "We've survived the first wave," she said. "We've shown them that we're not an easy target. But this is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we take the fight to them. Tomorrow, we show the Zarkanians why you should never, ever underestimate the human spirit." Around the world, as people emerged from shelters to see the damage wrought by the first day of conflict, a strange mood took hold. It wasn't optimism, exactly. The sight of alien ships in the sky had put paid to any notion that this would be an easy fight. But there was a grim determination, a growing realization that humanity, for all its flaws and divisions, was capable of standing united against an existential threat. In the streets of London and Paris, impromptu resistance groups formed, sharing information and resources. In the mountains of Afghanistan and the jungles of Vietnam, guerrilla fighters prepared ambushes, drawing on generations of experience fighting technologically superior foes. And in labs from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen, scientists worked around the clock, reverse engineering captured alien tech and devising new weapons for the battles to come. As night fell on the first day of the war, Commander Rice stood at the window of her command center, looking out at the stars. Somewhere up there, the main Zarkanian fleet waited, watching their ground forces struggle against this unexpectedly resilient prey. Rise allowed herself a grim smile. The aliens had demanded war, thinking it would be a swift conquest. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant, a species that had spent its entire existence fighting, adapting, and overcoming. "You wanted war," she whispered to the alien ships glittering in the night sky. "Well, now you've got one. And trust me, you have no idea what you've gotten yourselves into." The war for Earth had begun, and humanity, united as never before, was ready to show the universe what it was truly capable of. Preparation and first strike. The dawn of the second day of the Zarkanian invasion brought with it a new sense of purpose for humanity. The initial shock of first contact had worn off, replaced by a steely determination that spread across the globe like wildfire. In every corner of the world, people were mobilizing, not just to defend their homes, but to strike back at the invaders who had so arrogantly demanded their surrender. Commander Elena Reyes hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but they blazed with an inner fire as she coordinated humanity's fragmented yet surprisingly effective resistance. The strategy she had devised, a decentralized, unpredictable defense, was working better than anyone had dared to hope. The Zarkanians, for all their technological superiority, were struggling to adapt to the chaos of fighting a species that refused to play by the expected rules of engagement. "Status report," Rise barked, her voice hoarse from hours of nonstop communication. A young analyst stepped forward, his tablet displaying a global map dotted with red and blue indicators. "Ma'am, the Zarkanians have established beachheads in major urban centers across all continents. However, they're facing unexpected resistance in rural and mountainous regions." Rise nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "As expected, they're used to fighting centralized opponents. They don't know how to handle a species that can survive and thrive in every environment on the planet." The analyst continued, "We're seeing particularly effective guerrilla tactics in Southeast Asia, the Andes, and the Hindu Kush. Local fighters are using their knowledge of the terrain to ambush Zarkanian patrols and sabotage their equipment." "Excellent," Rice said. "And what about our more unconventional strategies?" A scientist stepped forward, her lab coat rumpled from days of nonstop work. "Commander, Project Babel is proceeding as planned. We've successfully introduced conflicting language databases into the Zarkanian translation systems. Their troops on the ground are experiencing significant communication difficulties." This was music to Ray's ears. The aliens had expected to waltz in and take over a primitive planet. Instead, they were facing a species that could not only fight back, but could do so in ways they had never anticipated. "What about our offensive capabilities?" Rise asked, turning to her military advisors. A grizzled general stepped forward. "We've had some success with EMP weapons against their smaller craft. It seems their shielding isn't designed to handle that kind of attack. We're also seeing promising results from our heat-seeking missiles. Apparently, their ships run a lot hotter than ours, making them easier targets." Rise absorbed this information, her mind already racing ahead to the next phase of the conflict. "Good. Keep pushing on those fronts. I want every advantage we can get." As the meeting continued, reports flooded in from around the globe. In the seas off Japan, a fleet of fishing boats had lured a Zarkanian destroyer into shallow waters, where it ran aground. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous tribes were using their intimate knowledge of the ecosystem to trap and disorient alien search parties. And in the skies over Europe, a hastily assembled squadron of fighter jets was engaged in a deadly dance with Zarkanian interceptors, using unconventional maneuvers to level the playing field against their technologically superior foes. But it wasn't just military action that was turning the tide. In universities and tech companies around the world, human scientists were working feverishly to understand and counter Zarkanian technology. Every piece of alien equipment captured or shot down was immediately whisked away to be studied, reverse-engineered, and used to develop new weapons and defenses. In Silicon Valley, a team of hackers had managed to penetrate the communication systems of a downed Zarkanian shuttle. They were now using that access to feed false information back to the alien fleet, sowing confusion and mistrust among the invaders. As the day wore on, Reyes received word of a critical development. A team of physicists in CERN had made a breakthrough in understanding the Zarkanian FTL drive technology. It wasn't enough to replicate it, not yet, but it opened up new possibilities for disrupting the aliens' ability to coordinate their forces across vast distances. "This is it," Reyes muttered, studying the preliminary report. "This is how we take the fight to them." She called an emergency meeting of her top advisors. As they assembled in the war room, Reyes could see the exhaustion on their faces, but also the fierce determination that had come to characterize humanity's response to this existential threat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice strong despite her fatigue, "we've been on the defensive since this war began. That changes now. Thanks to the brilliant work of scientists around the world, we now have a chance to strike at the heart of the Zarkanian fleet." She outlined the plan rapidly, her words painting a picture of a daring, almost reckless assault on the alien command ships still orbiting Earth. It would require coordination on a global scale, pooling resources and expertise from dozens of nations. But if it worked, it could change the course of the war. As her advisors debated the details, refining and improving the plan, Reyes felt a surge of pride. This was humanity at its best, creative, resilient, and utterly unwilling to give up in the face of overwhelming odds. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. As word of the plan spread, nations that had been bitter enemies just days before now worked together with single-minded purpose. Military assets were repositioned, scientists shared breakthrough discoveries, and in secret facilities around the world, a new weapon began to take shape. As the hour of the counterattack approached, Reyes addressed the troops who would be carrying out this audacious mission. Her hologram flickered to life in command centers and cockpits around the world. "You all know what's at stake," she said, her eyes burning with intensity. "The Zarkanians came here expecting an easy conquest. They thought we would roll over and surrender. Instead, we've shown them that humanity is not to be underestimated. Today, we take that lesson one step further. Today, we show them that we're not just capable of defending our home, we're capable of taking the fight to them." She paused, looking at each face, seeing the mix of fear and determination. "I won't lie to you. This mission is dangerous. Many of you may not come back. But know this, every one of you is a hero. Every one of you carries with you the hopes and dreams of our entire species. And when you strike at the heart of the Zarkanian fleet, you'll be striking a blow for every human being on this planet, and for every free species across the galaxy." As her speech concluded, a roar of approval went up from military bases around the world. Pilots climbed into their cockpits, their planes loaded with weapons that had been theoretical concepts just days ago. In silos and submarines, missile crews ran final checks on warheads that pulsed with strange alien-derived energy. And in low Earth orbit, undetected by the Zarkanian fleet, a handful of hastily modified satellites maneuvered into position, ready to unleash a burst of focused energy that would disrupt the aliens' FTL communications at a crucial moment. As the countdown to the attack began, Reyes stood in her command center, surrounded by screens showing real-time data from around the world. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come. This was the moment that would decide the fate of humanity. Either they would strike a decisive blow against the invaders, or... She pushed the thought aside. Failure was not an option. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to falter now. "All units, report in," she ordered, her voice calm and controlled. One by one, confirmations came in from around the globe. Fighter squadrons, missile batteries, electronic warfare units, all were in position and ready to strike. Reyes closed her eyes for a moment, offering a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening. Then she opened them, her gaze steely and determined. "Commence Operation Thunderbolt," she said. Across the Earth, humanity's counterattack began. Fighters streaked into the sky, their engines roaring defiance against the alien invaders. Missiles burst from their silos, their warheads glowing with strange energies. And in orbit, the modified satellites unleashed their payload, sending a pulse of disruptive energy washing over the Zarkanian fleet. The aliens, caught off guard by the sudden, coordinated assault, scrambled to respond. But their usual tactical algorithms, designed for conventional warfare, struggled to cope with the unconventional nature of the human attack. Fighter pilots, drawing on generations of aerial combat experience, danced and weaved through the Zarkanian formations, their less advanced craft somehow holding their own against alien technology through sheer skill and daring. Missiles, enhanced with reverse-engineered Zarkanian tech, slipped through energy shields calibrated to stop more conventional weapons. They detonated against the hulls of the massive alien ships, sending shockwaves of destruction rippling through the invaders' fleet. And perhaps most crucially, the FTL communication disruptor worked better than anyone had dared to hope. The Zarkanian command structure, accustomed to instantaneous communication across vast distances, suddenly found itself fragmented and confused. In her command center, Rise watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The losses on the human side were heavy. Every blip disappearing from her screens represented lives lost, heroes who had given everything to defend their home. But the Zarkanians were taking a beating unlike anything they had experienced in centuries of easy conquests. As the battle reached its crescendo, Rise received word of a critical development. A squadron of human fighters, flying a suicide mission into the heart of the alien fleet, had managed to strike a decisive blow against what appeared to be the Zarkanian flagship. The massive vessel, easily the size of a small city, listed in orbit, secondary explosions blossoming across its hull. And then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, it began to fall from the sky. A cheer went up in the command center, quickly echoed in military bases and civilian shelters around the world as news of the victory spread. The Zarkanian flagship, burning like a meteor, streaked across the sky before plunging into the Pacific Ocean, sending up a plume of steam visible from space. In the aftermath of this unprecedented assault, the remaining Zarkanian ships began to pull back, retreating to a higher orbit to regroup and reassess. For the first time since the invasion began, Earth's skies were clear of alien vessels. As the cheering died down, Rise allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had bloodied the nose of a vastly superior foe. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Zarkanians would be back, and they would be angry. "Well done, everyone," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the globe. "We've won the battle. Now let's prepare to win the war." As humanity celebrated its first major victory, Rise turned her attention to the challenges ahead. They had surprised the Zarkanians once. Doing so again would be even harder. But looking at the determined faces around her, at the reports of courage and ingenuity pouring in from around the world, she felt a surge of confidence. The Zarkanians had demanded war, thinking it would be an easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant. And now, that giant was not just awake. It was angry, united, and ready to fight with everything it had. The war for Earth was far from over. But humanity had served notice to the galaxy. Underestimate us at your peril. The battle for Earth. The euphoria of humanity's first major victory against the Zarkanian invaders was short-lived. As the burning wreckage of the alien flagship cooled in the depths of the Pacific, Commander Elena Reyes knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Zarkanians had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. "They'll be back," Rise said to her assembled staff, her voice cutting through the celebratory mood. "And when they do, they'll hit us with everything they've got. We need to be ready." The next few days were a flurry of activity. Every piece of debris from the downed Zarkanian ships was analyzed, every captured alien technology scrutinized for weaknesses. Scientists worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge as they struggled to understand and adapt the advanced alien tech. But it wasn't just about technology. Rise knew that humanity's greatest strength lay in its diversity, its ability to think and fight in ways the regimented, hierarchical Zarkanians couldn't anticipate. She encouraged this, fostering a global network of resistance that defied conventional military doctrine. In the dense jungles of the Amazon, indigenous tribes used their intimate knowledge of the rainforest to run circles around Zarkanian search parties. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, hardened Russian special forces waged a brutal guerrilla war against alien outposts. And in the sprawling megacities of Asia, vast networks of civilians engaged in passive resistance, sabotage, and intelligence gathering. As predicted, the Zarkanian counterattack came swiftly and brutally. The skies darkened once more as a new wave of alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere, their weapons primed for revenge. But this time, humanity was ready. In orbit, a hastily assembled defense grid of satellites and space stations, cobbled together from pre-invasion tech and reverse-engineered alien systems, met the Zarkanian vanguard. The resulting battle lit up the night sky, streaks of energy weapons and explosions visible from the ground across the globe. On the surface, the fight was even more intense. The Zarkanians, enraged by their earlier defeat, abandoned their previous strategy of targeted strikes. Instead, they carpet-bombed entire regions, trying to overwhelm human defenses through sheer firepower. In her underground command center, Rise watched the conflict unfold with gritted teeth. The casualties were mounting, entire cities reduced to rubble under the alien onslaught. But even as the reports of devastation poured in, so too did stories of incredible human resilience and courage. In the ruins of London, a group of civilians-turned-fighters used the city's ancient underground tunnels to outmaneuver and ambush Zarkanian ground forces. In the skies over New Delhi, a squadron of Indian fighter pilots, flying craft that were practically antiques compared to the alien ships, managed to down a Zarkanian cruiser through a combination of daring and clever use of the city's monumental architecture as cover. And perhaps most crucially, in labs and workshops around the world, human scientists and engineers were making breakthrough after breakthrough. The more the Zarkanians unleashed their advanced weaponry, the more humanity learned, adapted, and improvised. "Commander," a young lieutenant called out, his voice tinged with excitement. "We're getting reports from the Caltech team. They've managed to crack the alien shield frequency." Reyes felt a surge of hope. This could be the game changer they needed. "Get me a secure line to every military commander on the planet," she ordered. "It's time to put this knowledge to use." As the battle raged on, humanity began to turn the tide. Armed with the knowledge of how to penetrate Zarkanian shields, Earth's forces started inflicting serious damage on the invaders. Alien ships that had once seemed invincible now fell from the sky, brought down by weapons that, just weeks ago, would have been harmlessly deflected. But the Zarkanians were far from defeated. As their initial strategy faltered, they adapted, splitting their forces into smaller, more mobile units that were harder to pin down. The war evolved into a series of lightning-fast skirmishes across the globe, with both sides scoring victories and suffering defeats. In the war room, Rise pored over the latest intelligence reports. The Zarkanians were getting frustrated, their usual tactics of overwhelming force proving ineffective against humanity's decentralized, adaptable defense. But that frustration was making them even more dangerous, more willing to inflict collateral damage in their quest for victory. "We need to take the fight to them," Rise murmured, more to herself than to her staff. "We can't just keep reacting. We need to strike at their heart." It was a daunting prospect. Despite humanity's victories, the bulk of the Zarkanian fleet remained in orbit, an ever-present threat looming over the planet. Any attempt to attack it would be a massive undertaking, fraught with risk. But as Reyes looked around at her team, she saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her heart. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to back down now. "All right," she said, her voice steady and resolved. "Let's make a plan." The strategy they devised was audacious to the point of insanity. It involved simultaneously striking at Zarkanian positions across the globe, drawing their forces into a series of engagements that would stretch their resources thin. Meanwhile, a small elite team would attempt to infiltrate the alien command ship in orbit. The goal wasn't to destroy the ship. That would be impossible with the resources they had. Instead, the team would attempt to plant a virus in the Zarkanian central computer, one that would disrupt their coordination and possibly even turn their own systems against them. As the plans were finalized and forces moved into position, Reyes addressed the world. Her hologram appeared in town squares and on personal devices across the globe, her eyes blazing with determination. "People of Earth," she began, her voice strong and clear, "we stand at a crossroads. For weeks, we have fought against an enemy that sought to crush us, to strip us of our freedom and our very humanity. We have suffered greatly, lost much, but we have also shown the Zarkanians and ourselves what humanity is truly capable of when united against a common threat." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today, we take the next step. Today, we bring the fight to the invaders. I won't lie to you. The battle ahead will be hard. We will suffer more losses, more pain. But we will also have a chance to strike a decisive blow against those who thought they could come to our world and claim it as their own." Raya's voice grew fiercer, filled with the indomitable spirit that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "To the Zarkanians, I say this: you came to our world thinking us weak, divided, easy prey. You have learned otherwise. We are humanity. We are millions of years of evolution, of surviving against the odds, of facing challenges and overcoming them. We are the species that looked at the impossible and said, 'Watch us.'" Her final words were a rallying cry, a defiant shout to the universe. "You demanded war. Now witness the full might of a united humanity. We are coming for you." As Reyes' speech concluded, a roar went up from every corner of the globe. In cities and villages, in bunkers and battlefields, humans steeled themselves for the fight ahead. The Zarkanians, monitoring the transmission, felt a chill run down their spines. For the first time since the invasion began, they felt something alien to their species: doubt. The battle began at dawn. Across the planet, human forces launched coordinated attacks on Zarkanian positions. In the air, on land, and at sea, the fight raged with an intensity that shook the very foundations of the earth. But this was more than just a military engagement. It was a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. In Africa, Maasai warriors rode into battle alongside armored vehicles, their intimate knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable in outmaneuvering the aliens. In the Arctic, Inuit hunters used techniques passed down through generations to track and ambush Zarkanian patrols. Every human skill, every scrap of knowledge, every cultural tradition became a weapon in this all-out war for survival. The Zarkanians, used to fighting opponents who mirrored their own tactics, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of the human response. As the ground battle raged, a small, stealthy craft slipped past the Zarkanian orbital defenses. On board was the elite team tasked with infiltrating the alien command ship. Led by a brilliant hacker and a seasoned special forces operator, the team represented humanity's best hope for turning the tide of the war. Their mission was a knife's edge of danger and possibility. If they succeeded, they could throw the entire Zarkanian war machine into chaos. If they failed, Earth would lose some of its best and brightest in a futile gesture. Back in her command center, Reyes tracked both the ground battle and the orbital mission with growing tension. The human forces were holding their own, even gaining ground in some areas, but the losses were heavy. Every victory was paid for in blood. Hours passed, the conflict raging unabated. Then, just as it seemed the human forces might be reaching their breaking point, something changed. The Zarkanian attacks, once precisely coordinated, began to falter. Their ships moved erratically. Their ground forces fell into disarray. A cheer went up in the command center as they realized what had happened. The infiltration team had succeeded. The virus was working its way through the Zarkanian systems, turning their greatest strength, their reliance on centralized, A-driven command, into a crippling weakness. Reyes allowed herself a moment of elation before snapping back into commander mode. "This is our chance," she barked. "All forces, press the advantage. Don't let up." Across the globe, human forces surged forward. Zarkanian ships fell from the sky, their systems haywire. On the ground, alien troops found themselves cut off from command, their advanced weapons systems malfunctioning. As the day wore on, the tide of battle shifted decisively. The Zarkanians, for the first time in their long history of conquest, found themselves on the defensive. In orbit, their once mighty fleet began to scatter, individual ship commanders making the decision to flee rather than face destruction. By nightfall, it was clear that a miracle had occurred. Against all odds, humanity had won the day. The Zarkanian invasion force was in full retreat, leaving behind a battered but unbroken Earth. In the command center, exhausted but exultant, Reyes addressed her team. "We've won a great victory today," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of issuing commands. "But the war isn't over. The Zarkanians will be back, and next time, they'll be ready for our tricks." She looked around the room, seeing the mixture of triumph and determination on every face. "But so will we. Today, we've proven what humanity can do when we stand together. We've shown the galaxy that Earth is not to be trifled with." As the news of victory spread across the globe, celebrations erupted in every city, every village. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious. But as the cheers rang out, Reyes and her team were already planning for the future. The Zarkanians had awakened a sleeping giant, and now that giant was ready to take its place on the galactic stage. The battle for Earth was won. The war for humanity's future was just beginning. Turning the tables. The aftermath of humanity's victory over the Zarkanian invasion force was a mixture of jubilation and grim determination. As the last alien ships disappeared into the inky blackness of space, leaving Earth's skies clear for the first time in weeks, Commander Elena Reyes knew that this was not the end, but merely the beginning of a new phase in the conflict. "We've won the battle," she told her assembled staff, her voice tinged with both pride and caution. "But the war is far from over. The Zarkanians will be back, and next time, they'll come with everything they have." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity unlike anything humanity had ever experienced. With the immediate threat of invasion lifted, the focus shifted from survival to preparation. Every piece of alien technology left behind became a treasure trove of information. Every captured Zarkanian a source of invaluable intelligence. Scientists and engineers from around the world worked tirelessly, reverse engineering alien tech and integrating it with human ingenuity. The results were nothing short of revolutionary. Quantum computers that could process information at speeds once thought impossible. Energy weapons that could punch through the strongest known materials. And perhaps most importantly, advancements in propulsion technology that brought the stars within humanity's reach. But Reyes knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough. The Zarkanians had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. What was needed was a fundamental shift in strategy, a way to take the fight to the enemy in a way they would never expect. The answer came from an unlikely source. Dr. Amelia Chen, a cultural anthropologist who had been studying the Zarkanians' social structure based on intercepted communications and prisoner interrogations, approached Reyes with an intriguing theory. "Commander," Dr. Chen began, her eyes alight with excitement, "I believe I found a critical weakness in the Zarkanian Empire. They're not just technologically advanced, they're culturally stagnant. Their society is rigidly hierarchical, with little room for individual thought or innovation. It's what allowed them to build their empire, but it's also their Achilles heel. Rise leaned forward, intrigued. Go on. We've been thinking of this as a purely military conflict, but it's not. It's a clash of cultures. And in that arena, we have the advantage. Our diversity, our adaptability, our creativity. These are weapons the Zarkanians have no defense against. As Dr. Chen laid out her plan, Rice felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. It was audacious, maybe even crazy, but it just might work. They wouldn't just fight the Zarkanians, they would subvert them from within. The plan that emerged over the next few days was unlike any military strategy in human history. It combined cutting-edge technology with age-old human traits of innovation, persuasion, and even a touch of mischief. The goal was not just to defeat the Zarkanians militarily, but to undermine the very foundations of their empire. The first step was to establish a presence in Zarkanian space. Using the advanced propulsion technology reverse-engineered from alien craft, a fleet of stealth ships was prepared. These weren't warships in the traditional sense, but carriers of a different kind of payload: culture. Each ship was loaded with a carefully curated selection of human art, music, literature, and philosophy. But more than that, they carried specially trained teams of humanity's best and brightest: scientists, artists, philosophers, and yes, soldiers too. Their mission was not to conquer, but to infiltrate and influence. As the fleet prepared to depart, Rise addressed the crews. "You're about to embark on the most important mission in human history," she said, her voice carrying to every ship. "Your job is not just to fight, but to show the galaxy who we really are. Show them our creativity, our passion, our unwavering spirit. Make them question everything they thought they knew about us." With a mixture of trepidation and excitement, the fleet launched, disappearing into the vast expanse of space. For weeks, Earth waited with bated breath, receiving only sporadic, encrypted communications from the expedition. Then, slowly at first, but with gathering momentum, reports began to filter back. The human fleet had made contact with various species within the Zarkanian Empire, many of whom were growing discontented with their overlords' rigid rule. Human music was being played in alien clubs. Human literature was being translated into a dozen different languages, and human ideas about freedom, individuality, and self-determination were spreading like wildfire. The Zarkanians, initially dismissive of this cultural invasion, soon found themselves facing a threat unlike any they had encountered in their long history of conquest. Worlds that had been under their control for centuries began to question the status quo. Alien species that had once cowered before Zarkanian might now look to humanity as an example of how to resist. But it wasn't just their subjects that were being affected. Even among the Zarkanians themselves, exposure to human culture was causing ripples. Young Zarkanians, raised on stories of human tenacity during the Earth invasion, began to secretly seek out human art and ideas. Underground movements sprouted within Zarkanian society, calling for reforms and greater individual freedoms. Back on Earth, Rides watched these developments with a mixture of pride and amazement. "We're not just fighting a war," she mused to her staff. "We're starting a revolution." The Zarkanian leadership, however, was far from defeated. As reports of unrest and cultural contamination spread throughout their empire, they decided to strike back with overwhelming force. A massive fleet, larger than anything they had sent to Earth, was assembled. Its mission: to crush the human interlopers and remind the galaxy of Zarkanian supremacy. As the Zarkanian armada approached, tension mounted among the human fleet. They were outnumbered and outgunned, their ships not designed for full-scale military engagement. But they had one advantage the Zarkanians couldn't match: the ability to think outside the box. Captain Sarah Mukherjee, commanding one of the human ships, summed it up best in a transmission back to Earth. "They expect us to fight like them, to play by their rules. But that's not who we are. We're humanity. We change the rules." And change the rules they did. Instead of meeting the Zarkanian fleet head-on, the human ships scattered, each one becoming the center of a web of influence. They reached out to the worlds and species they had contacted, calling in favors, rallying allies, and sowing confusion among the Zarkanian ranks. When the Zarkanians arrived, expecting to find a cohesive enemy fleet to destroy, they instead found themselves facing a galaxy in revolt. Ships from a dozen different species, inspired by humanity's example, harried the Zarkanian fleet. Colonies that had been under iron-fisted control for generations rose up, throwing off their shackles and declaring their independence. And through it all, the human ships danced and weaved, always one step ahead, coordinating the resistance and continuing to spread their message of freedom and self-determination. The Zarkanian commanders, trained to think in terms of strict military hierarchy, found themselves unable to cope with the chaotic, decentralized nature of the rebellion. Orders were ignored, battle plans fell apart, and for the first time in their history, the mighty Zarkanian armada began to falter. As news of the uprising spread, more and more worlds joined the fight. Species that had been bitter enemies found common cause in resisting Zarkanian rule. And at the heart of it all was humanity, not conquering, but connecting, inspiring, and leading by example. Back on Earth, Reyes and her team watched in awe as the reports came in. What had started as a desperate plan to defend their homeworld had turned into a galactic revolution. Humanity, the species the Zarkanians had dismissed as primitive and weak, was reshaping the power dynamics of an entire sector of the galaxy. "We did it," Reyes breathed, looking at the holographic display showing the retreat of the Zarkanian forces. "We actually did it." But even as the celebration began, Reyes knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had proven itself on the galactic stage, had shown that it could not only survive but thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. Now came the hard part, building a lasting peace. As the Zarkanian Empire crumbled, a power vacuum was left in its wake. Dozens of species, long suppressed under alien rule, were now free to determine their own destinies. But freedom, as humanity well knew, came with its own challenges. In the days that followed, Earth became a hub of intergalactic diplomacy. Representatives from newly liberated worlds came seeking guidance, alliance, and support. Humanity, so recently isolated on its own world, now found itself at the center of a burgeoning galactic community. Reyes, once solely a military commander, now found herself playing the role of diplomat and peacemaker. It was a challenging transition, but one she approached with the same determination and creativity that had seen humanity through the war. "We didn't fight this war just to become the new Zarkanians," she told the assembled alien delegates at a crucial summit. "We fought for the right of every species to choose its own path. Our goal isn't to rule, but to cooperate, to learn from each other, to grow together, and to ensure that no empire, no matter how powerful, can ever threaten our collective freedom again." As the summit progressed, a new galactic order began to take shape. Not an empire, but a federation of free worlds. A place where diversity was celebrated, where ideas and cultures could intermingle freely, and where disputes were settled through dialogue rather than warfare. It was a monumental task, fraught with challenges and setbacks. Old rivalries and suspicions didn't disappear overnight. The remnants of the Zarkanian Empire, though defeated, still posed a threat, and humanity itself had to navigate its newfound position of influence without falling into the same traps of arrogance and complacency that had doomed the Zarkanians. But as Reyes looked out at the stars, now filled with possibility rather than threat, she felt a sense of profound optimism. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and had not only survived but thrived. They had turned the tables on an enemy that had thought them defenseless, had transformed a war of survival into a revolution that spanned the stars. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but Reyes had no doubt that humanity was ready for the challenge. They had proven themselves not just as warriors, but as innovators, diplomats, and bridge builders. They had shown the galaxy that strength came not from domination, but from cooperation and mutual respect. As she prepared to address the people of Earth and their new alien allies, Reyes smiled. The Zarkanians had demanded war, thinking it would be an easy conquest. Instead, they had sparked a revolution that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the universe would never be the same again. Triumph of the human spirit. The galaxy was changing, and humanity stood at the epicenter of that change. In the months following the defeat of the Zarkanian armada, Earth had become a beacon of hope for countless species across the stars. The story of how a supposedly primitive world had not only resisted conquest, but sparked a revolution that toppled an interstellar empire had spread far and wide, capturing the imagination of oppressed peoples everywhere. Commander Elena Reyes, now serving as Earth's representative to the newly formed Galactic Cooperative, found herself at the heart of this transformation. The small underground bunker, where she had once coordinated humanity's desperate defense, was now a bustling center of interstellar diplomacy. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked its corridors, their translators humming as they discussed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. But even as humanity celebrated its newfound place in the galactic community, Reyes knew that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Zarkanian Empire, while defeated, was not destroyed. Its remaining forces had retreated to their core worlds, licking their wounds and, undoubtedly, planning their revenge. "We can't let our guard down," Reyes warned the Earth Security Council. The Zarkanians built their empire over millennia. They won't give up after one defeat, no matter how significant. Her words proved prophetic. Just as the Galactic Cooperative was beginning to find its footing, alarming reports began to trickle in from the frontier worlds. Zarkanian ships, bearing new and terrifying weapons, were on the move. It seemed the Empire had decided to make one last, desperate push to reassert its dominance. As news of the Zarkanian resurgence spread, panic gripped many of the newly liberated worlds. Some talked of surrender, hoping to avoid the Empire's wrath. Others looked to Earth, the planet that had defied the odds once before, hoping for another miracle. Reyes knew that the coming conflict would define not just humanity's future, but the future of the entire galaxy. In a speech broadcast to every world in the cooperative, she rallied the diverse species to stand united. "We've come too far to turn back now," she declared, her voice resonating across 1,000 alien worlds. "The Zarkanians think that by showing their teeth, they can frighten us back into submission. But they've forgotten what we're capable of when we stand together. Human, Xanthari, Volcrin, Etherian. Our differences are our strength. Our diversity is what allowed us to overthrow tyranny once before, and it's what will see us through this final challenge." As Reyes spoke, she could feel the mood shifting. Fear gave way to determination. Despair transformed into resolve. Across the galaxy, species that had cowered before the Zarkanian banner for generations now stood tall, ready to fight for their hard-won freedom. The response to the Zarkanian threat was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just a military mobilization, but a confluence of ideas, technologies, and strategies from 100 different cultures. Human ingenuity combined with Xanthari energy manipulation, Volcrin stealth systems merged with Etherian biotech. The result was a fighting force as diverse and adaptable as the coalition it defended. As the Zarkanian fleet advanced, they found not cowering worlds ripe for reconquest, but a galaxy united against them. Every strategy they had honed over millennia of easy victories now faltered in the face of tactics they couldn't predict, technologies they didn't understand, and a level of cooperation between species they had always believed impossible. The final battle unfolded not around a single planet or star system, but across an entire sector of space. Zarkanian warships, imposing and deadly, clashed with the smaller but infinitely more agile craft of the cooperative. Human pilots, their natural talent enhanced by alien neural interfaces, danced through asteroid fields and nebulae, drawing the enemy into carefully laid traps. On the bridge of the Earth ship Defiant, Reyes coordinated the defense, her mind linked to a vast network of alien intelligences. She could feel the ebb and flow of battle, not just through tactical readouts, but through the shared experiences of 100 different species all fighting as one. The Zarkanians, accustomed to being the most advanced force on any battlefield, found themselves outmatched at every turn. Their rigid tactics crumbled in the face of strategies that shifted and adapted mid-battle. Their mighty warships, once the terror of the galaxy, were swarmed by swarms of smaller craft that seemed to anticipate their every move. But even as the tide of battle turned in the cooperative's favor, Reyes knew that victory alone wasn't enough. The cycle of violence and retribution had to end, or the galaxy would never know true peace. In a move that would be debated and analyzed for generations to come, Reyes opened a channel to the Zarkanian flagship. Her image, projected onto the alien bridge, faced the Supreme Commander of the Empire's forces. "You've lost," Reyes said simply, her voice calm but firm. "But it doesn't have to end in your destruction. We're offering you a choice, a chance to be part of something greater than conquest, to add your strength and wisdom to a galaxy united in peace, not divided by war." The Zarkanian commander, his many eyes blinking in confusion, couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. "You would show mercy, after all we've done?" Reyes nodded. "Mercy isn't weakness. It's the ultimate strength. We fight not because we love violence, but because we cherish peace. We're offering you that peace now. The choice is yours." For long moments, silence reigned across the battlefield. Then, slowly at first, but with gathering momentum, Zarkanian ships began to power down their weapons. The Supreme Commander, his voice heavy with the weight of history, spoke words that would echo across the stars. "We surrender, and we accept your offer of peace." As news of the Zarkanian surrender spread, celebrations erupted across the galaxy. Species that had known nothing but fear and subjugation for generations now tasted true freedom for the first time. The great Zarkanian Empire, which had seemed eternal and unassailable, had fallen not to superior firepower, but to an idea. The idea that diversity and cooperation were stronger than uniformity and domination. In the days that followed, the real work began. Integrating the Zarkanians into the Galactic Cooperative would be a monumental task, fraught with challenges and setbacks. Centuries of hostility and mistrust couldn't be erased overnight. But as Reyes watched former enemies cautiously begin to work together, she felt a profound sense of hope. 1 year after the final battle, representatives from every known spacefaring species gathered on Earth for a historic summit. In a ceremony broadcast to trillions of beings across the galaxy, the Galactic Cooperative was formally established as a federation of free worlds. As Reyes took the stage to address the assembled delegates, she couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. It had begun with a brutal invasion, with humanity fighting desperately for its very survival. Now, Earth stood as the linchpin of a new galactic order, a symbol of what could be achieved when diverse peoples came together in common cause. "We stand here today, not as conquerors, but as partners," Reyes began, her words translated into 1,000 alien tongues. "We've proven that the greatest strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation, not in fearing our differences, but in celebrating them." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Former enemies sat side by side, their past conflicts set aside in the name of a greater future. "The road ahead will not be easy," Reyes continued. "We have wounds to heal, trust to build, and challenges yet unforeseen to face. But we face them together, united in our diversity, stronger for our differences." As Reyes spoke, she could feel the energy in the room, the sense of possibility that hung in the air. This wasn't just the end of one conflict, but the beginning of a new era for all sentient life in the galaxy. The Zarkanians thought they could conquer us because we were different, Because we lack their unity of purpose, Rais said, her voice rising with passion. They saw our diversity as a weakness, but we proved that it is our greatest strength. Human ingenuity, Syntheri wisdom, Volcran adaptability, Aetherian empathy, and yes, even Zarkanian determination. All of these together make us stronger than any one of us alone. As she concluded her speech, Rais felt a profound sense of accomplishment, tinged with humility. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and had not only survived but thrived. They had taken their place among the stars not as conquerors, but as peacemakers and bridge builders. We came together to face a threat, Rais said, her final words ringing out across the galaxy. Now we stay together to build a future where every world, every species, every individual has the chance to reach their full potential. A future where the only borders that matter are the ones we choose to cross in the name of friendship and discovery. As thunderous applause filled the chamber, Rais looked up at the stars visible through the transparent dome. Those same stars that had once seemed so distant, so full of threat, now represented infinite possibility. Humanity had been tested, had faced the fire of interstellar war, and had emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The Zarkanians had demanded war, thinking it would be an easy conquest. Instead, they had sparked a revolution that reshaped the galaxy. Humanity, once alone in the cosmos, now stood at the center of a vast community of worlds. They had not just survived first contact, they had thrived, turning potential extinction into a triumph of the human spirit. As the ceremony concluded and delegates from 100 worlds mingled, sharing stories and forging new bonds, Rais allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. The challenges ahead were immense. The work of building this new galactic society would take generations. But looking at the vibrant tapestry of life around her, the former commander felt nothing but optimism for the future. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, and the universe, it turned out, was all the richer for their presence. In the vast expanse of space, countless stars twinkled, each one now a beacon of possibility rather than a potential threat. The war was over. The real adventure, the challenge of building a lasting peace among the stars, was just beginning. And humanity, with its unyielding spirit, its boundless creativity, and its newfound allies, was ready to meet that challenge head-on. The galaxy would never be the same again. And that, Rais reflected with a smile, was the greatest victory of all.